If you have grown up with siblings, first off, I'm sorry, but I can relate. I have two older brothers, Patrick, who's 9 years older than me, and Thomas, who is 7 years older than me. Yes, I know, 7 years, it's a lot, but that doesn't stop us from having the average sibling bond. You know, the one where you're best friends one day, and then they look at you the wrong way, and you ignore them for a whopping 2 days until you're best friends again. Yeah, that one. And for those of you who have siblings, I'm sure you've experienced the thousands of fights and insults. Unfortunately for me, with my brothers being so old, the fights were slightly unfair. Where my best insults at the age of 5 were, "Oh my gosh, you are such a loser," theirs were a bit more complex. Typically, the fight started with them making fun of my blonde eyebrows, or as they would say, the lack thereof. But the one that really got under my skin was when I would walk into the room and my brother would look me dead in the eye and let off a massive baa sound. Yes, like a sheep. It sounds stupid, but that dumb animal impersonation still haunts me to this day. I was born with a rare hereditary mutation called woolly hair nevus. Woolly hair nevus is a condition in which one or more sections of your hair has a different texture, and in cases like mine is hyperpigmented. The texture is that of sheep's fur, which gives it the nickname woolly hair syndrome. This syndrome is so rare that it lacks much information on it, but basically it's due to a mutation in the DNA and hair genes causing it to have different texture. For those of you interested in bio, it's an autosomal recessive gene. And for those of you not interested in bio, that means that it's 2 copies of an abnormal gene that must be present in order for the disease or trait to develop. The condition can be all over the scalp, but for me, this section is only in the right back of my head. It has no negative effects on my health, but still has acted as my biggest mental insecurity for the past 17 years. When I was born completely bald. As weeks passed and my luscious blonde locks grew in, the one spot in the back of my hair remained bare. At first, my parents thought nothing of it, but after a couple more weeks of the spot remaining there, they took me to the doctors. After the doctor examined me, they found absolutely nothing and referred me to another doctor. And after those doctors examined me, they also found nothing. He then referred me to another dermatologist who told my parents I had some really rare disease and would probably not make it past the age of 3. Which is not true because I'm standing here 15 years later, thank God. Eventually, after months of tests and the offer to be a star of my own personal case study, I was officially diagnosed with woolly hair nevus. My parents were relieved that there was nothing seriously wrong with me, but confused as how this happened. Woolly hair syndrome is scientifically described as a rare congenital abnormality of the structure of the scalp. In addition to the extreme kinkiness or curl pattern of the hair is also far more fragile and sparse. Beyond this, the hair is so close together that it makes it hard to be combed. Because of this, and with the fact that woolly hair nevus is so rare, there's a lack of epidemiological studies on it. My mom was unsure as to how to deal with my hair. When I went to the hairdresser for the first time, my mom decided that the easiest thing to do would just be to shave the section. And this process just kind of stuck for the past 17 years. When I was really young, I didn't really recognize the problem with it because to me it was my normal. But as I grew older, I realized that my hair was different. I began to develop an insane amount of insecurity in my hair, or what my parents began to refer to as my curly patch. I would see the other girls at school wearing their hair half up, half down, and would refuse to do the same. And on the off chance that was decided to be the way that was how I decided to wear my hair, I'd be greeted with the constant remarks asking me, "What is that on the back of your head?" Eventually, I grew out of it and grew sick of it, and ponytails and headbands became my best friend. I'm not going to lie, for a majority of my childhood, I would forget that my hair was different because it's not something that I can constantly see. Woolly hair syndrome isn't something that is constantly there, but it's something that's constantly on my mind. In elementary school, I treated it like some weird secret that only my best friends were allowed to know. Part of it was because I felt kind of or part of it was because I felt insecure and felt like they were the only people I should let know, but the other part was because they were really the only ones who cared. No one around me was there enough to even notice the patch on my head, so why should they care to begin with? As I grew into middle school, I still carried my so-called secret with me. I remember one time I was sitting in Mr. McCrae's orchestra room for a violin lesson, something that I had no talent or passion with. But despite my terrible musical skills, I still enjoyed these lessons because one of my best friends was in it with me. She, along with a select of other girls, were the only ones who knew about my hair. For some reason, we were drawing on the whiteboard, and she drew an image similar to this. This is a drawing of me and the rest of the lesson group, and that is my curly patch. After this and what I explained to them, I began to be called Broccoli Head. I guess it was an upgrade from the Bang, but it still was not my favorite nickname I've been given. I mean, I guess it was clever enough for me to remember and tell you guys this story 7 years later, but even still, I'm sure none of them remember it. I guess that just goes to show how different events can affect different people so much. After middle school came high school. I wish I could say there's just some type of realization where this insecurity just disappeared and now I'm this sort of all-confident woman, but that is far from the truth. I'm still insecure about my hair, but if I was given the chance to take it, I don't know if I would. Just last week, I was in gym class and I was talking to a friend who I hadn't talked to since 8th grade. We hadn't had any problems, and I still love and think she's a great person. We just kind of drifted apart. But while we were catching up, she looked at me and said, "You know, out of all the people I hung out with in middle school, I think you have had the best glow up." Initially, I was offended. Like, if you think about it, that seems like the most backhanded compliment ever. She really looked at me and said, "You were trash in middle school, but you're cool now." And then I remembered what I looked like in middle school, and I was like, okay, I can kind of see it. But then she explained that that's not what she meant. She told me that I had a mental glow up and said, "You just seem to have found who you are and have really grown into yourself." It was such a simple statement, but it honestly was one of the most kind things that someone has told me in a long time. As I said before, woolly hair nevus is insanely rare. I've never found someone who could relate to this issue. I realize now my insecurities didn't stem from self-hatred, but rather the fact that I was different than those around me. I would compare something so minute, such as my hair, to something that no one else cared about and make it my whole life. In fact, I'm sure most of you in front of me have never even heard of woolly hair nevus, never mind the fact that I have it. When you put your insecurities into perspective of the whole world, they hold very little value. But even still, we let them determine our opinion and mood. Heck, even today I changed my outfit about 7 or 8 times before I even decided what I should wear for this presentation. When really, this shouldn't matter. Each of us hold unique values and embrace all of our individuality. You should not let the way you see yourself in one moment determine your worth. Because where you see one flaw that you fixate on, others can see 20 incredible things about you. About 83% of the entire population admits to feeling constantly insecure. With this in mind comes the fact that none of us are alone in feeling like this. What is more important is learning to accept who you are regardless of others' opinions. Through something as small as my hair, I've learned how to embrace myself. In the beginning, I saw it as an inconvenience. I used to Google the cause for this and be left dry because no one had anything similar. It's not a genetic disorder, so none of my family has had it, and much like my friends, none of them can relate. And in 30 years, I'll still have this patch of hair on my head, and since it's not genetic, likely none of my kids will have it. And even after I pass, my children's children and my children's children's have children, likely none of them will have it. So in that way, it makes me unique, which is the best thing to be. Thank you.